Frankly, does anyone in this room know the answer to that question? Like, what do you think the resistance demographics? What's the demographic of the resistance at large? Naomi, yeah.
Like middle-aged women, right?
Yeah. So the demographic of the resistance is definitely, for better or worse, like middle and older white women is pretty much it.
My last video focused on militant Marxist Dwayne Dixon, organizer for Redneck Revolt, who was invited to the Harvard Carr Center for Human Rights.
You talked about the crisp evidence of the liberal university's complicity in fascist whatever. Fascist creep. Part of it is the separation of logic from emotion, which has been a misogynist project. It was also an Enlightenment and racist project. And it's a deeply anti-left, anti-progressive project. And that this may indeed be a moment that calls for a more robust integration of tactics and strategies that include both violence and nonviolence. All sorts of ways in which we see the left doing this because of an articulation, a sense, perhaps quite real, that we are indeed at war and that this is a different kind of phase of war, a fascist state under the Trump-Pence regime. So, but if we all bear arms, where does that?
I mean, I'm a full abolitionist, and yeah, let's get rid of the military. Let's get rid of the full arsenals that compel all of us into this position.
During my research for the video, I began looking into the funding of some of the organizers. The man you've just seen speaking and nodding his head in agreement with Dixon, along to the snapping of LARPing revolutionaries and visiting high school students, is in fact the core faculty and program director at the Carr Center for Human Rights Policy. As far as I am aware, he personally arranged this event and invited Dixon. Timothy McCarthy, adjunct lecturer in public policy, award-winning scholar, teacher, public servant, and social justice activist, who holds a joint faculty appointment in Harvard's undergraduate honors program in history and literature, the Graduate School of Education, and the John F. Kennedy School of Government. Since 2008, he has also been the core faculty and program director at the Carr Center for Human Rights Policy, and on April 5, 2017, he delivered the inaugural lecture to launch Resistance School, an online learning hub for progressives who want to reclaim, rebuild, and reimagine America in the Trump era. So let's see what Resistance School is. It's exactly what you would expect. Practical skills to reclaim, rebuild, and reimagine America. Turn your outrage into offline action. A free digital training platform for civic engagement and community organizing. Learn, engage, and act, as seen in the New York Times, Time, HuffPost, The Nation, USA Today, and CNN. Of course, offering courses such as how to mobilize and organize, public narrative, understand why public narrative is key to being a leader, and transforming resistance into a social movement.
Congressman, yes, it's the way our processes work. If you need to make a change in our algorithms, there are several steps in the process, including launch committees and user testing and our rater guideline evaluation.
But at your company, your employees can get together and chat in groups, right? Google Groups?
Yes, they can.
And one of those groups is the Civil Rights Group, right?
We have many employee resource groups on which they can participate in conversations, yes.
Have you ever looked into the conversation into the Resist group?
Congressman, no.
Is that a surprise to you that there's a Resist group?
I'm not aware whether such a group exists or not.
If there was a Resist group, would that be the type of thing that you would want to look into?
You know, we have clear policies around how our products are built. And
no, but if there's a Resist, you know that the Resist movement is a movement built to resist the agenda of President Trump. If there's a Resist group within your company where groups of employees, not one, are getting together within that group to engage in discourse on company time with company infrastructure, does that strike you as the type of thing you would want to investigate?
Congressman, I'm not aware of any such group. None like that has been brought to my attention, and happy to follow up, and understand the concern better.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I seek unanimous consent to enter into the record a document from what purports to be Google employee Miles Borens, which is opposed to the Google group Resist.
Without objection, so ordered.
So if your assumption is that people can act in bad faith, why then have you not launched an investigation into the communications that seem to indicate a desire to suppress conservative political movements and conservative voices?
Well, if there are allegations around, discussions which are specific with the intent of manipulating our products, we would conduct an investigation.
Okay, well, that's good to hear. The Wall Street Journal reported that your workers were discussing tweaking search terms to frame the discussion over the travel ban. Did you perform an investigation into that allegation?
We looked into it. There was no attempt at, anything to influence our products.
Chair recognizes the gentleman from Ohio, Mr. Jordan, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Pichai, in your opening statement, you said, I lead this company without political bias and work to ensure that our products operate that way. Ileana Murillo is Google's head of multicultural marketing. Does Ms. Murillo do good work?
I'm not directly familiar with her work, but she's an employee of Google, and we are proud of our employees.
Well, you praised her work. The day after the 2016 election, in a 4-page email she wrote about her work with the Latino vote, she said, even Sundar gave our effort a shout-out. Is she referring to you there?
She was referring to my communication around translation for a different related effort.
Okay, well, I'm going to look at 2 other sentences she had in that long email, again, recapping her work in the 2016 election with the Latino vote. She said this, we pushed to get out the Latino vote with our features. A few lines down in her email, she qualified that sentence, and she said, we pushed to get out the Latino vote with our features in key states. And she specifically cites the states Florida and Nevada. Near the end of her email, in a similar sentence, she says, we supported partners like Voto Latino to pay for rides to the polls in key states. With me? I want to kind of analyze those 2 sentences. We pushed to get out the Latino vote with our features in key states. We supported partners like Voto Latino to pay for rides to the polls in key states. Is it fair to say the we in both sentences, Mr. Pichai, refers to Google?
Congressman, we are very concerned whenever there are allegations like that. Our team looked into it.
I'm not asking that question. I'm asking, is it fair to say the we in both sentences refers to the company Google?
As Google, we wouldn't participate in any partisan efforts around any civic process, so I don't think so.
So we pushed and we supported partners like Voto Latino to pay for rides in polls in key states, and we pushed to get out the Latino vote during the 2016 election. And how were they getting that done? They were getting that done by, according to Ms. Murillo, your head of multicultural marketing, by altering your features or configuring your features in such a way and for paying for rides for people to get to the polls. Is that an accurate reading of those? That's all I'm asking. Is that fair to say what those sentences are talking about?
Not aware of all the specifics, but we did look into it. We found no evidence that there were any activity like that from Google towards that organization.
So she's not telling the truth?
Yes, that's right. We haven't found any evidence to substantiate any.
So she just made it up out of thin air the day after the election and wrote this email to your top executives, and it's not true?
Congressman, I'm happy to follow up, but I think the employees today do their own activities.
We don't want the follow-up. I want the real answers right here in this committee. Well, I just think it's interesting, Mr. Chairman, I know I'm over time, but I think it's interesting that their head of multicultural marketing writes an email the day after the election where she talks about 71% of Latino votes voted for Hillary, but that wasn't enough. And she talks about paying for rides to the polls in key states for Latino votes to get out the Latino vote in key states. And the head of the company says that's not accurate. Does Ms. Murillo still work for the company?
It's my understanding she does, yes, sir.
Is it true that she sent that email, or could that be fake news?
My understanding is that there were emails which were sent, like the...
And then you put up a Google form. And then you put up a Google form.
We have many employee resource groups on which they can participate in conversations, yes.
Have you ever looked into the conversation into the Resist group?
It's time to ask Mommy and Daddy for tuition, because we're going to resistance school.
I helped start this project because I believe that policy schools can be powerful engines of change to make the world a better place. But policy schools are inherently restricted. They're hard to get into, expensive, and can only take so many students per year. Because of that, I feel a moral duty while I'm here to pass along the tools that I have access to. I want to give them to the people doing the real work on the ground every day. Pass them along to the agents of change who are already making the world a better place.
It's funny, for all the funding and activism they do, they can only get 33 subscribers, and they have to unlist their videos and disable the comments and the like-dislike bar.
Our power on our side of the aisle in organizing comes from our numbers. We don't have guns, we don't have money. We are people with limited resources. Our power comes from our numbers. And so our numbers must grow beyond what we have in order to achieve that kind of transformative change.
Rapid Resist started a year ago, so we're a resistance startup. The Upsurge, I am the founder and the starter of Rapid Resist, and we're going to try and learn 3 things today. I'm going to do my best to impart wisdom on, 1, how to win. That's our first objective. It's like, how do we win policy battles? My specialization is crowds and media.
Now we get to the real meat of it, and we'll see how Resist uses pseudo-legal methods to project influence and even intimidate, and using some rather questionable methods to do it. To me, it appears like they're exploiting these people, preying on their gullibility and self-interest, and using that to gain political advantage by any means necessary.
We do it through peer texting, so I'm going to try and be as useful as I can in talking really granularly as well about like how, as an organizer, you can use mass peer-to-peer texting. It's a new technology. It really kind of came into full effect for Bernie and Hillary, and now it's like a commodity that anyone can use, just like email was. So hopefully you'll learn something about that today. And then I'm going to zoom out a little bit and talk about like strategically what I think is required to put the resistance into power.
Power isn't just what you have, but what your opponent thinks that you have. Just like the US can project naval power and air force overseas, they're projecting at least an illusion of power, which is able to intimidate and influence legislators.
So after Trump, like we were crying, like I was in Berkeley, so there was like a grieving circle and we sang and like held each other. And then we were like, okay, what do we do? And pretty obvious after like that first thought is like, well, Congress is like the major check on executive power, and the Senate is pretty close, right? So do folks in this room know who Dean Heller is? Some hands, some nods, right? So like major target on his back, Republican senator in Nevada. So like it's him and it's a few other folks that could really like stop Trump. And at that point it was like, can we stop the crazy cabinet from coming in, you know? Can we stop like his evil henchmen from being confirmed? And I was like, hey, how are you going to get your senators to stop the like crazy henchmen? And we actually got some great ideas from them. So the Working Families Party of Nevada, this is in March, tells us Dean Heller is having his campaign kickoff fundraiser. So he's announcing, I'm running for re-election. It's at a Harley-Davidson in Las Vegas. It's a secret event, $1,000 plate. We find out 72 hours in advance. We had just been playing around with texting. We get a list of Democratic voters, and we text them on behalf of the Working Families Party of Nevada. Hey, we're going to show up at his fundraising kickoff event. Is being organized with signs in front of his donors and in front of the press. And what we saw was the next day, before the press could cover that story, he put out a statement. He said, "I'm not going to support full repeal and." Oh, the confirmations, the judicial confirmations. You guys following those at all? Like fastest pace ever in the history of judicial confirmations is going through, and Chuck Grassley is the senator that's the head of the Judicial Committee. And so like we had one like very devoted volunteer who was just like, oh, we have to text on like judicial confirmations. And so she found out Chuck Grassley was having a series of town halls in the most rural parts of Iowa. And we texted, we like bought people, you know, Democrats within like 2 hours drive and texted them, and turned out crowds at these super rural town halls. And then the Washington Post covers it, and like, there's all this news about like angry crowds about judicial confirmations, and then that was the week before he actually like said no to like the 3 like craziest confirmations. The second question, Doug Jones, we did work on Doug Jones. So we work on those critical moments with local trusted partners. In that case, we worked with the NAACP. And what happened was I found out that there was no one registering women and black voters.
Your head of multicultural marketing, who you praised her work in this email, gave her a shout out, was lying when she said you were trying to get out the Latino vote in key states?
We today, in the US, around elections, we make it, and this is what users look to us for, where to register to vote, where to find your nearest polling place, what are the hours they are open, and we do those things effectively.
I appreciate that, Mr. Pichai. I already said that's being a good corporate citizen. What I'm asking is, why did you only do it in key states?
We called the NAACP and we're like, hey, we want to text unregistered voters for you. We bought a list from the data vendors and then like whipped up our volunteers. We sent 160,000 text messages actually. So like we ignored Virginia actually for the most part, except working with the NAACP on November 7th because there was so much money going into it. But we worked all across the country on November 7th with 37 other candidates. So like we ignored Virginia actually for the most part, except working with the NAACP on November 7th because there was so much money going into it. But we worked all across the country on November 7th with 37 other candidates because it's like marginal dollar spent, right? And then the first question was, oh yeah, so there are apps. The one we found most recently is called Rumble. If you guys want to like Google like Rumble peer text or Rumble texting or whatever, it's like so aggressive. It's not a Republican app, I don't think. I think it just works on both sides. The apps that we have, all of the vendors are only left except for Rumble. So all the other like peer-to-peer texting vendors are only leftist.
Is there a possibility of what was in the news in the last year of like Russian trolls calling out one group to protest one thing and another group to anti-protest the same thing through texting?
Yeah, so to our knowledge, we haven't recruited people for a Russian event yet. We're theoretically open, no. So we do that, right? If you, not for you guys, sorry, we don't care about Berkeley, but for people watching who are in a red or purple area, like, wow, we'll do free texting for you. That's neat. So yeah, you just go to this link, rr.team/rapidresist, and you're like, we're doing this. And then boom, it like goes into the machine. Our staff get alerted, we like glance at it, and then if we don't have a list, we can buy a list if it's a super critical event. Basically the way it works, organizers, is there media going to be there? Is there a legislator that's going to be there? If yes to either of those questions, we will buy a list and text for you for free. So like set up a huge rally and get media there. So the other ways to get involved, folks in Berkeley, Blue District organizers, we call you, text with us, right? It's super satisfying. You can text people to turn them out to yell at a legislator that you hate. You can text people after they do that to run for office. That's probably the most satisfying thing that our volunteers do. They're like, hey, do you want to run for office? And they get like, me? Like, and you know, like, frankly, I think that like what we found is women are often like the demographic group that need that text and that need someone on the other line being like, yes, like you can do it. Like now is your time. Like we always have a script that's like, we really need women to run right now. That you like click that button to send that text. So it's a super fun way to help. It's super valuable, super meaningful. People keep relationships with folks they've texted with. So that's two. And then if you are running a campaign, we definitely, basically we have an LLC that like we got good at this, so now we sell it and fund the rest of our work with it. And so if you have a progressive campaign on an issue or a ballot proposition or a candidate, find me after or email hello@rapidresist.org, and we can talk about leveraging our volunteers and our data and our software to win. So people are texting peer-to-peer, right? So what peer-to-peer means is you have an individual sending a single text message to another person. If you've gotten any of the texts that are like, hi, I'm Yoni, I'm with Goldman Women, come to this event. Like that's peer-to-peer text. There's a human on the other side. And to be honest, like the key differentiator here is a legal one. You cannot robo-dial just anyone. You can't just like call whoever you want, but you can speed dial them. So the law requires a single button to be pushed if you want to cold text people. So basically the creative legal nuance that happened is they created these essentially speed texting software apps. Hustle, Relay, Ground Game are the current apps. MoveOn has their own, Spoke. SEIU has their own that they've developed that basically let you preload a script and a CSV of phone numbers and first names and other custom information. And then me on the other end, I just go click, 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 click. I just sent 6 text messages out, and then someone responds. I can just manage that conversation like I would a normal text message.
Now here's a direct example of how fake news is used to manipulate people. But if they're primarily recruiting from people who listen to mainstream media, that explains a lot about the gullibility we're about to see ahead.
So like the person's life and what they're seeing and like their current context is going to drive whether they think it's relevant. So the first thing to consider is like, is this in the news cycle? Like when you're getting those like crazy world on fire emails that are driven by the news cycle, that's the principle that's being used. It's like, did someone read about this in the news? Like that makes it contextual, then they're going to like be more likely to respond positively. And then the next thing we do is we try and make it local as well. So we never text as rapid resist, right? So we're always like Working Families Party of Nevada or Indivisible Anchorage, or like the more local the better, because if you got a text from, Goldman Women to come to this event, like that's a lot more relevant than like rapid resist. Like it's an affiliation. So we try and use those affiliations. Yeah, so demographics. Frankly, does anyone in this room know the answer to that question? Like, what do you think the resistance demographics? What's the demographic of the resistance at large? Naomi, yeah.
Like middle-aged women, right?
Yeah, so the demographic of the resistance is definitely, for better or worse, like middle and older white women is pretty much it. Those are the people who show up in mass. That's not to say that like that's everyone, but that's maybe 60% of folks. And yeah, they respond to texts fine. That's like a whole nother dissertation. Cool, so I'll answer those backwards. The research wing is our Slack channel we called it Future Campaigns. And people who like want something to happen join the Slack channel. And so we have women, basically mainly middle-aged women, are like, just like pouring through local news and like, they're just like on the hunt. So like when March for Our Lives happened, like we got a spreadsheet from a national partner of like, here are all the marches happening. And then like what we had to do is we had to find the contact information for each of those organizers. So we just put it on our like Future Campaigns channel in Slack, and people like hunted down the organizers for every March for Our Lives. And we're like, hey, can we text for you? We'll do it for free.
So how do you like that? You got a clique of housewives sitting around texting, possibly influencing elections, and by their own admission, affecting the outcome of appointments and the passing or not passing or repealing of laws. Welcome to your future digital democracy. But even while these people manipulate you, they themselves are being manipulated.
So this very blurry map that I just put together an hour ago, you can see over here, like, we're not working on the coasts, right? So like, why are we not working on the coasts? That's like the first slide I showed you, right? It's just not relevant. Like those legislators are not relevant. And like that's the premise of rapid resist. So we kind of like slipped in and like filled that space, basically, doing the kind of like blue to red governance strategy, if you want to think about it like that. So that's how we started. And we grew fast. We sent 5.8 million text messages in 2017, which I am told makes us the largest peer-to-peer texting group. Yes?
Do you all support like campaigns, like if you want a particular person elected, or like single policy issues, or is it just like influencing like big legislation?
We do support campaigns, and I swear you're not a plant either. But so here's some of the names of the groups. And I guess before I answer that question, just to give you like the appropriate context, it's like we hand you a list of 180 names as an organizer in Bangor, Maine, or whatever, right? And then your job is to get to that question, like who's running for office. Your job is to take power. So like each of these is like its own local political ecosystem, right? So what we're trying to do is take all these awesome organizers and give them, here's another 180 volunteers for you, right? Here's another 180 members of your organization, with the objective long term of building power and learning not to right click. So what we do is we get an activist, and then the first thing we do work for campaigns. The first thing we do is we actually ask activists to run for office. And this is the like kind of most bizarre, schemiest, most enjoyable part of my work. I'm actually recruiting candidates. Can you text for that? And we were a C3 at the time, so I was like, no. And he kept asking, and I was like, fine. So we filed a C4, and we texted to ask people, hey, like, you've stepped up in the past. Would you run for office? Just like that, basically that simple. Like, I'm with the Modesto County Dems or whatever it is. And 12% of people who had like made a call even or went to a town hall were like, yeah, I'd consider running for small local office. So it was kind of this like holy moly moment, right? Like August, it was in August. And so that was like this moment where we're like, okay, how do we scale it, right? We're going to have like tens of thousands of people who have turned out to events. They could potentially run for office. Like, what's the next step? They need to be vetted and trained, right? So that was the next step is how do we turn all these activists into like a wave of candidates, right? That's kind of the big picture of where the organization is going. I think we're going to have Hazel on the line. Our first candidate that we found was in Midland, Texas. And we're going to actually have her jump on board, join her, it's like her first video call ever. And we're gonna have her video in. Oh, sorry, let me just do that again. Hazel, go ahead and introduce yourself for everyone. We're okay now.
Okay, I'm Hazel Hudson, and I'm running for Justice for Peace, Precinct 1 in Midland, Texas. For Justice for Peace, Precinct 1 in Midland, Texas.
Wonderful. And what's your background, Hazel?
Well, I've been an LPN, some states say LPN, but I'm a nurse for 28 years now. Married, 2 daughters.
Hazel, you got a text message that asked you to run for office. Can you tell me why that was effective in getting you to actually decide to run?
Well, I started thinking.
Did you ever see yourself at any point in your life as someone that would run for office?
No, never.
How do you feel about your campaign? Do you think you might win?
I think so.
Yeah. There we go.
Precinct 1.
What inspired you to run for this position?
Well, I received a lot of questions and I want to make a change. I'll put it like that.
Okay. What are the main differences between you and your opponent?
I really don't know him. To be honest with you, I know nothing about him. But I heard he's a nice man.
What makes you a distinguished selection for this position?
I'm a native Midlander. I've been a nurse for 28 years. And I'm willing to learn and make some changes that needs to be made.
Okay. Perfect.
Now look, I'm not even necessarily against a system like this in principle, but I have a list of problems with it. That these tools are exclusively left-wing, their clandestine nature, that their work pretends to be on the behalf of someone else, the pseudo-legality of it, skirting or circumventing campaign finance laws. I have a problem that it can act as a vote multiplier, projecting power out of blue states to influence the democratic process in other areas, even arranging funding and carpooling projects to do so. This comes up again and again. Rapid Resist targets women and minorities, but more than just targeting voters, they manipulate these people with flattery and delusions of grandeur. In reality, they're setting up the vast majority of them for failure, all for the sake of political power. Another problem I have with Rapid Resist and similar groups is that their tactics seem to involve sabotage, deception, and intimidation, as much or more than any positive, proactive organizing.
All right, well, we're behind you, Hazel. We're going to help you. We're going to help you get into office. To win and to feel like you can actually accomplish something, you need to touch people who know where you should run, how to run, set those meetings up. Basically, the plan is ask 100,000, 200,000 activists to run, get a list of 20,000, 30,000 folks, pass them off to county party chairs, right? So that's the grand scheme of where we're going. So we reached out to every county. These are the counties that said yes on our first sweep. These are the county parties that were like, yeah, I'll work with you. So we started basically having texting for a candidate. We would be like, we'll run your get out the vote. So we ran, if you guys know Run for Something, we gave all of their candidates very close to free texting, as close as we could legally get to free texting. As close as we could legally get to free. And what we started doing is interacting with the campaign managers. This is the invisible puppet string, machine master of politics. So yeah, so the things we talked about today, recap everyone, movement moments, right? So there are particular moments where legislators can be influenced. They're in the news, there's a vote coming up, right? And bringing crowds and media to that attention and triangulating with their influencers, their donors, or other powerful folks, and making a compelling case.
It seems totally insane to me that #resist can organize, promote, and execute these artificial rallies, even arranging carpools to do so. And what's supposed to be an act of community is largely orchestrated by outside bodies. And not only that, but it's all paid for by NGOs and charitable organizations with tax-exempt status where they don't outright have taxpayer funding.
The second question, Doug Jones. We did work on Doug Jones. So we work on those critical moments with local trusted partners. In that case, we worked with the NAACP.
And that these tax-deductible donations can then be used to finance political campaigns for particular parties in particular districts. And just to be clear, donations to branches of the NAACP are not tax-deductible. However, membership dues to the national organization are tax-deductible. Further, as a 501c3 organization, the NAACP are restricted on how they may register or get someone out to vote. How exactly that is just too cloaked in bureaucracy for me. But the congressman from earlier said that he was most concerned about Google targeting Latinos in key states, in key races.
And she says, we supported partners like Voto Latino to pay for rides to the polls in key states.
So that's Rapid Resist. Thank you, Resistance School. Cameras. Thanks, Goldman folks, for coming out. I enjoyed spieling at you. Thanks for your questions. I'll hang out afterwards. Cheers.
Action showing up at marches. So it could be that moment. The question is, will it be sustained? And that any little victory you obtain, as big as it might seem, raising the minimum wage in the United States to $15 seems like a huge Herculean national task. But that would just be one little dot on the spiral. Passing healthcare reform, huge Herculean task, another dot on the spiral. Why? Because really the point of organizing and social movement building is not actually just to win these things, it's to grow the people power for the next fight. And so if that win doesn't actually grow the number of people engaged, it actually in many ways is a failure. Because we can win, but then if the movement shrinks or doesn't grow, we can't actually win the next thing or even sustain the victory that we won.
Fuck yourself!